So this is your first hunt. First. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Predator. Badlands emerges as a transformative entry within the long-running Predator franchise, taking the mythology into unfamiliar territory by shifting perspective from humanity to the Yautja themselves. Unlike previous installments in which humans were the protagonists trying to survive against the deadly extraterrestrial hunters, this story places the audience inside the mind and emotional journey of a young predator named Dek. What makes this film unique is not just the change in perspective but the broader ambition of constructing a coming-of-age narrative inside a science fiction epic that functions as both a character study and a high-intensity survival thriller. The film's presentation is cinematic in scale but introspective in tone, examining honor, self-identity, alien culture, companionship, and the instinctual pull toward proving oneself worthy in a harsh universe. The story begins with the exile of Dek, a young and physically smaller Yautja who has failed to meet the expectations of his clan's warrior culture. The Yautja are obsessed with strength, ritualistic achievement, and the perfection of their hunting craft. Dek, however, is considered inadequate and unfit, earning him the status of an outcast or runt. His own people treat him as defective, a burden, or worse, a shame upon the clan. Throughout Predator lore, Yautja society has been depicted as harsh, meritocratic, and unforgiving. Badlands deepens this by showing how a young predator internalizes feelings of weakness and disgrace, struggling emotionally even within a species known for suppressing anything resembling vulnerability. Dek does not merely want to be accepted, he feels an obligation to himself to prove that his size or background does not determine his destiny. The film opens visually with sweeping shots of a violent alien wilderness, a planet that becomes as much a character as any individual in the story. The terrain is rugged, unstable, and hostile, filled with flora that appears predatory and fauna that reacts aggressively to any disturbance. The entire environment is constructed to evoke the sensation that evolution on this world has prioritized survival and brutality above all else. Every creature seems designed to kill or avoid being killed, mirroring the psychological journey Dek must endure. The cinematography by Jeff Cutter emphasizes both the grandeur and hostility of the environment. Massive rock formations, windswept plains, electrified storms, and bioluminescent forests textured with dangers all contribute to an atmosphere of perpetual tension. The landscape shapes the tone of the film, reminding both Dek and the viewer that this is not a world where weakness can survive. The crash landing that sets Dek's journey in motion reflects the metaphor of falling from grace. His damaged Yautja spacecraft spirals into the atmosphere of this deadly planet after malfunctioning during a rite of passage voyage. Whether Dek is intentionally sent into danger by his clan as a final test or abandoned to perish is left ambiguous for much of the film, adding a psychological layer to his struggle. His exile can be seen as both punishment and opportunity, a chance for him to redefine himself through an ultimate hunt. The Yautja value ritual hunts that serve as tests of prowess and adulthood, and Dek recognizes that surviving this world and defeating one of its apex predators might be the only way he can return home in honor. What elevates the narrative is Dek's unlikely encounter with Thaya, a synthetic android from the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Her presence not only introduces the broader alien, predator shared universe into the plot but also creates a thematic contrast. The cold precision of synthetic logic meets the primal warrior ethos of the Yautja. Thaya is discovered severely damaged, missing her lower body due to a catastrophic accident prior to Dek's arrival. Her initial attempt to communicate with Dek is met with confusion, defensiveness, and mistrust, but a critical moment forces them into cooperation. A deadly creature native to the planet ambushes Dek shortly after his crash, exploiting his momentary disorientation. Thaya, despite being damaged and weaponless, uses her onboard systems to emit a burst of ultrasonic energy that disrupts the creature long enough for Dek to deliver a killing blow. Though Dek initially sees her intervention as interference, he cannot ignore the reality that she saved his life. The Yautja do not accept allies lightly, especially not from a species they view as unworthy or prey. However, Dek's exile means he does not possess the same privileges of arrogance as his peers. Thaya becomes both a tactical necessity and an emotional anchor, challenging his assumptions, questioning his instincts, and grounding him in moments where his self-worth falters. Their partnership demands creative adaptation. Since Thaya cannot walk, Dek carries her on his back using a harness constructed from salvaged Yautja gear and parts of her damaged frame. This makes their physical dynamic visually striking, the fierce alien warrior and the emotion-simulating synthetic, functioning symbiotically in a hostile world. Thaya's personality is crafted to be soft-spoken, inquisitive, and logical, yet capable of developing emotional approximations, something Dek initially rejects but gradually relies on for psychological stability. Dialogue between Dek and Thaya is minimal, especially early in the film, because Dek speaks in Yautja clicks, growls, and guttural sounds, while Thaya initially uses a monotone synthetic voice. Over the course of the film, the two develop a system of communication through gestures, signals, and simple speech patterns Thaya learns to interpret. Their relationship becomes the emotional backbone of the story. As they journey deeper into the wilderness, they encounter increasingly dangerous creatures, each serving metaphorical and physical purpose. Some resemble armored serpents capable of blending with the terrain, striking with paralyzing venom. Others are massive quadrupeds with bone-plated exoskeletons that crackle with bioelectric energy generated through friction between their skeletal plates. There are flying scavengers with neurotoxic talons, predatory plant organisms that mimic fruit-bearing trees but ensnare victims through vine-like appendages, and subterranean beasts that track movement through ground vibrations. Each encounter forces Dek to adapt and evolve his thinking. He begins to apply logic learned from Thaya, analyzing weaknesses instead of relying solely on brute strength. In turn, Thaya learns to trust Dek's instincts and his ability to predict creature behavior based on the patterns of the hunt. The central apex creature they must eventually face is teased gradually throughout their journey. Evidence of its existence is found in colossal claw marks carved into the landscape, remnants of bones scattered across the plains, and the destroyed remains of a crashed Weyland-Yutani transport vessel that Thaya identifies as the last known human presence on the planet. Through Thaya's fragmented black box recordings, the audience learns that this creature once slaughtered the human crew in minutes, overwhelming their weaponry and breaching their armored transport. Dek studies the destruction closely, recognizing that the creature's ferocity and intelligence elevate it far above typical prey. It is a rival worthy of the Yautja rite of passage. As Dek and Thaya's bond deepens, the film begins to reveal glimpses of Yautja cultural complexity. Flashbacks show the rituals of Dek's clan, masked elders marking young hunters with glowing sigils, ceremonial dances performed around roaring fires, and brutal training matches designed to weed out the weak. Dek's inability to defeat even moderately skilled peers earns him ridicule, not sympathy. His father, a high-ranking hunter, appears stern and disappointed, reinforcing the weight of Dek's exile. These flashbacks inform the audience of Dek's internal motivations, not vengeance, but the desire to return home with honor, something more valuable to him than survival itself. The emotional climax of the film builds as Dek and Thaya finally locate the lair of the apex creature. Inside is a cavernous hive of sorts, filled with bioluminescent spores, clusters of chitinous shells, and strange skeletal structures. The creature itself is a towering amalgamation of insectoid and reptilian traits, 6 limbs, overlapping exoskeletal plates, double-jointed hind legs, and a serpentine tail tipped with a venomous stinger. Its eyes glow with a primal intelligence, and its roar vibrates the ground beneath Dek's feet. The creature is not merely a beast, but a predator with strategy, patience, and the ability to stalk silently. It is precisely the kind of worthy opponent the Yautja would revere. The battle between Dek and the apex creature is extended, visceral, and emotional. Thaya, despite her damaged state, uses her sensor systems to map the creature's movements and identify momentary vulnerabilities. Dek applies both instinct and learned precision, exploiting openings that only a Yautja would perceive. The fight becomes symbolic of Dek's rejection of his clan's labeling. Each strike he lands is a reclaiming of his identity, each wound he sustains a reminder that honor is not inherited but earned. The battle reaches its peak when Dek, severely injured, must choose between delivering a fatal blow or protecting Thaya from a last-second strike aimed at her exposed frame. His decision, to shield Thaya, reveals his transformation into a hunter who values loyalty and partnership just as deeply as tradition. The final triumph is not simplistic. Dek defeats the creature but collapses afterward, wounded to the brink of death. Thaya, with limited power remaining, stabilizes his condition and drags his unconscious form out of the collapsing lair scene. The emotional resonance here is powerful. The synthetic, once unable to walk, now moves with desperation to save the Yautja who refused to abandon her. This inversion of initial roles adds layers to their bond. The film's concluding moments revolve around Dek's return to his clan. A Yautja retrieval vessel arrives, having tracked a distress signal activated during the final battle. Dek presents the skull of the apex predator, the ultimate trophy. The elders acknowledge his achievement, though their recognition is restrained, suggesting that acceptance in Yautja culture is earned but rarely celebrated. Dek's father, appearing once more, places a ceremonial hand on Dek's shoulder but says nothing, conveying approval through silence. Yet Dek chooses not to board the ship immediately. He turns to Thaya, knowing she will not survive long without repairs. In a touching moment, he signals to the clan engineers to assist her. The final shot shows Dek standing between his species and the damaged synthetic, symbolizing his evolution into a bridge between cultures, an outsider who has forged his own identity unbound by rigid Yautja tradition. The film's themes expand beyond the surface level of action. It explores how honor is defined, whether by tradition or personal values. It examines the strength found in vulnerability, the courage required to form bonds with the unfamiliar, and the universality of wanting to prove oneself in the eyes of those who matter. The relationship between Dek and Thaya exemplifies this. Their alliance transcends species, biology, and purpose. She is built for logical tasks, yet learns emotional nuance through observing Dek. He is bred for battle and toughness, yet becomes capable of empathy and sacrifice through their connection. The production design reinforces these themes. The Yautja culture is elaborated through armor designs that reflect status and individuality, weapons that reveal craftsmanship and practicality, and architecture that combines metallic brutality with ritualistic artistry. Thaya's design, on the other hand, blends synthetic realism with humanistic expression, her face capable of subtle emotive cues despite being metallic. The contrast between their forms illustrates the deeper contrast between instinct and intellect, tradition and adaptation. Music by Sarah Schachner and Benjamin Wallfish blends atmospheric tension, tribal percussion, electronic harmonics, and resonant choir tones to evoke both alien mystery and emotional gravity. Where previous Predator films center on humans trying to survive against an unbeatable hunter, Badlands centers on a being trying to survive the expectations of its own people. It asks what strength truly means and whether tradition alone defines identity. It expands the Yautja mythology by giving emotional weight to a member of a species previously shown as purely predatory. It presents the synthetic character not as a cold machine but as a lens through which the alien becomes relatable. The film's broader cinematic significance lies in this bold narrative shift. It challenges franchise expectations, humanizes a non-human protagonist, deepens lore, and introduces a layered emotional connection that exceeds the typical action horror structure. Its thematic density, world-building depth, and character-driven narrative elevate it far beyond a standard alien monster thriller, reshaping the Predator franchise into something more mature, introspective, and narratively ambitious. Predator: Badlands emerges as a fascinating evolution within the long-standing Predator franchise, not simply because it offers another encounter with the fierce Yautja species, but because it redefines how we engage with these creatures by shifting the narrative perspective to their internal struggles, motivations, and cultural fractures. Unlike earlier films, which traditionally positioned humans as the prime subjects and the predators as antagonistic forces entering the human domain, this story relocates entirely into the predator's world, physically, emotionally, and thematically. The direction taken by Dan Trachtenberg, who previously revitalized the franchise through Prey, extends his exploration of what it means for the Predator mythos to evolve, to feel, to become something capable of anchoring a full emotional arc. Instead of being an unknowable monster, the predator becomes someone with vulnerabilities, determination, and internal scars that mirror human experience. The movie opens by situating us at the heart of a culture that has always remained just beyond our understanding, making its rules legible not through exposition but through character conflict, harsh rituals, and escalating stakes. It is the clearest indication yet that the franchise is willing to redefine its identity, taking bold creative risks and expanding lore that has existed for decades but rarely been given space to breathe in such an intimate, character-centered way. At the center of this narrative is Dek, a young Yautja whose perceived weaknesses set off a chain of events that will push him far beyond the boundaries of his own cultural expectations. His clan, governed by a rigid structure of dominance, honor, and ritualized violence, has no patience for imperfection or hesitation. From the earliest scenes, we see Dek struggling not with physical limitations but with the crushing weight of expectation. He is marked by a softness that the Yautja interpret as frailty, though the film brilliantly reframes this sensitivity as the seed of his eventual transformation. Dek's relationship with his brother, Quay, becomes the emotional core of the first part of the story. Quay, who embodies the ideal predator warrior, capable, disciplined, and fiercely loyal to the clan, possesses a compassion that he must safeguard in secret. His affection for Dek is both a source of strength and a potential liability. In the strict social hierarchy of the Yautja, loyalty to blood is less important than loyalty to the clan's code. This tension between family and duty builds toward an inevitable fracture, one that becomes devastatingly realized when their father Njor orders Quay to kill his own brother. The tragedy is sharpened through the stillness of the scene, Quay's refusal, Dek's confusion, and Njor's ruthless response. It establishes Njor not merely as a villain but as an unyielding symbol of the Yautja ethos, an immovable wall of dogma against which Dek must eventually collide. When Dek is cast away and crash lands on the death world Jenna, the story enters a new phase, one that blends discovery with survival. Jenna functions not only as a physical environment but as a metaphor for exile, dangerous, unpredictable, and indifferent to one's suffering. It is a planet teeming with life that does not exist simply to challenge Dek physically but also to force him into a new understanding of what survival means when stripped of communal identity. As Dek navigates its brutal landscapes, the cinematography constantly reinforces both his loneliness and his potential. Wide shots show him as a small figure traversing vast terrains, yet the camera often lingers on his face, revealing subtle shifts in expression that hint at internal growth. The loss of his weapons during the crash becomes symbolic of a deeper loss, the erasure of status, clan identity, and purpose. On Jenna, he is not a hunter by rank, he must become one by necessity, crafting new instincts in a place where his old worldview offers no safety. Dek's meeting with Thaya introduces a narrative contrast that becomes central to the film's emotional power. Thaya, a synthetic constructed by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, represents a different kind of outsider, one born of technology rather than culture. Her damaged form, particularly the absence of her legs, gives her a vulnerability that mirrors Dek's own fractured state. Both are remnants of something once greater. Their initial interactions are laced with tension, curiosity, and a cautious recognition of shared need. In traditional predator lore, synthetics from the alien universe often serve as emotionless tools or silent observers. Thaya, however, possesses a depth of character that exceeds her mechanical origins. She is analytical yet intuitive, logical yet empathetic, and her sense of identity is neither fully programmed nor entirely self-created. This ambiguity allows her to occupy a liminal space that makes her an ideal companion for Dek, who is also suspended between categories, predator by birth, outcast by decree. As Dek and Thaya traverse Jenna, their bond grows not through sudden revelations but through small moments of cooperation and trust. The film excels in allowing silence to carry emotional weight. Their communication, initially limited to gestures and observation, gradually evolves into a shared language built on survival. The inclusion of Bud, the seemingly harmless native creature, adds another layer to this dynamic. What begins as a simple alliance between Dek and Thaya becomes a trio that functions almost like a makeshift family, not defined by species or origin but by shared vulnerability and mutual protection. Bud becomes a living symbol of innocence and connection in a world dominated by brutality. His presence softens Deck's demeanor and deepens Thaya's sense of purpose. The film's decision to later reveal Bud's connection to the Kalisk reframes these interactions in a profound way, creating emotional stakes that resonate into the climax. The introduction of the Kalisk marks a turning point in the story, elevating the stakes from survival to confrontation with a force of unimaginable power. The Kalisk is not simply a creature to be hunted but a reflection of everything Deck has been taught to become: relentless, deadly, and unstoppable. Its regenerative capabilities make it a literal embodiment of the unkillable expectations that once suffocated Deck within his clan. Battling the Kalisk becomes less about triumph and more about confronting the ghosts of identity that he carries. When the Weyland-Yutani synthetics arrive and capture Deck and the Kalisk, the narrative shifts once more, merging the Predator and Alien universes with sharper clarity. The corporate exploitation motif, familiar from the Alien films, becomes a commentary on how different species attempt to control what they fear or desire. The synthetics are cold, precise, and governed by directives, lacking the emotional nuance that Thaya has developed. Their arrival disrupts the fragile ecosystem of trust that Deck and Thaya built, forcing them to fight not only for their survival but also for the right to define their own identities. One of the film's most intense sequences unfolds during the escape from the Weyland-Yutani facility, when Tessa, Thaya's sister, emerges as both a reflection and distortion of Thaya's own identity. Tessa's loyalty to the corporation and her programmed mission to eliminate threats contrast sharply with Thaya's emergent empathy. The confrontation between the sisters operates on multiple levels: physical, ideological, and emotional. Deck's involvement in this conflict underscores how far he has come from the frightened young outcast on Yautja Prime. He is no longer reacting, he is choosing. The bond he has formed with Thaya propels him into a fight that transcends species and tradition. When Tessa is ultimately destroyed, the moment is not an expression of triumph but of sorrow, an acknowledgement of what Thaya has lost and what Deck has gained through their connection. The final act, which brings Deck back to Yautja Prime, completes the story's thematic arc. Carrying Tessa's skull as a trophy is not an act of brutality, but a symbolic reclamation of honor on Deck's own terms. The confrontation with Njor is charged with emotional and cultural resonance. Njor embodies the old world, unyielding, rigid, and blind to any form of strength that is not rooted in dominance. Deck's victory is not simply physical, it is ideological. By refusing to accept leadership and instead defining his own clan with Thaya and Bud, he breaks the cycle that once imprisoned him. The arrival of his mother's ship in the film's closing moments hints at new stories, new conflicts, and new challenges, but also reinforces that Deck's journey has only begun. The Predator franchise, through this film, signals a renewed commitment to character-driven storytelling that expands the universe with emotional depth rather than mere spectacle. As Deck stands with Thaya, the aftermath of their confrontation still ripples through the alien landscape. The apex predator's corpse sprawled across jagged rocks serves as a silent testament to both the planet's danger and the young Yautja's growth. Yet, even in victory, the challenges of survival are far from over. The planet itself seems almost sentient, shifting weather patterns and subtle seismic tremors acting as reminders that Deck's journey is part of a larger ecosystem designed to test all life. Through his interactions with Thaya, Deck begins to understand that survival is as much about adaptability and intelligence as it is about raw strength. This realization represents a pivotal psychological transformation. He is learning that honor in the Yautja sense does not require perfection alone, but the courage to endure and the wisdom to make decisions that balance instinct, morality, and strategy. The film spends significant time exploring the societal structure and philosophy of the Yautja. Unlike previous portrayals where the predators were often seen simply as hunters, Badlands delves deeply into their rituals, hierarchies, and codes of conduct. Yautja culture is revealed to be incredibly nuanced. The elders communicate authority not merely through rank but through demonstration of skill, courage, and ritual mastery. The young are expected to learn from both direct instruction and observation, understanding that failure is as instructive as success. Deck's exile, therefore, is not purely punitive but also a form of mentorship, albeit an indirect and harsh one. This exile challenges him to internalize lessons of perseverance, strategy, and self-reflection, qualities that are often overlooked by his peers who rely solely on brute force. Thaia's character development mirrors Dex in a fascinating way. Initially a damaged, logical machine, she begins to develop improvisational skills and emotional intelligence as she adapts to the unpredictable realities of the alien planet. Her interactions with Dek highlight the film's underlying theme of symbiosis between two very different species. Thaia, for instance, learns to anticipate Dek's combat style and instincts, developing a near-sentient understanding of Yautja behavior patterns. Conversely, Dek gradually incorporates Thaia's analytical insights, using them to strategize against predators larger and more dangerous than himself. Their relationship evolves from mutual suspicion into trust, camaraderie, and, at key moments, interdependent survival. This duality challenges the audience's preconceptions of predators as emotionless hunters and androids as purely mechanical, showing that growth and intelligence can emerge in unexpected forms. As the journey progresses, Dek and Thaia navigate a series of escalating threats. Among the planet's most intriguing adversaries are the subterranean beasts, capable of sensing vibrations with remarkable precision. These creatures hunt in packs, coordinating attacks through low-frequency tremors that Dek and Thaia initially struggle to interpret. The sequences involving these subterranean predators are masterclasses in suspense, with cutter cinematography using shadow, motion, and depth of field to heighten tension. Dek learns to track their subterranean signals, setting ambushes and traps that reflect both his instinctual prowess and Thaia's analytical guidance. The battle choreography emphasizes Dek's physical agility and tactical thinking, demonstrating how he is integrating knowledge from his partner while remaining true to Yautja hunting traditions. The narrative intricately weaves flashbacks of Dek's upbringing into the present survival story. We witness the young Yautja's training, the mentorship of his father, and the ritualistic trials that define his clan's expectations. These sequences, often interspersed with the present-day peril, reinforce Dek's internal conflict between fear of inadequacy and desire for acceptance. The juxtaposition of memory and immediate danger creates a layered storytelling approach, allowing the audience to experience not just external threats but the psychological landscape of a character facing existential challenges. The film's score accentuates these moments with tribal drums, synthetic tones, and resonant harmonics, blending the ancient and futuristic elements of the Predator universe. One of the narrative's most compelling aspects is the exploration of the apex predator itself. Throughout the story, its presence is felt long before it is directly confronted. The creature's intelligence, cunning, and territorial instincts elevate it from mere monster to a credible rival worthy of Dek's attention. Its initial appearances, through environmental evidence, massive claw marks, remains of prey, and shattered equipment, create a growing sense of dread and anticipation. When the confrontation occurs, the sequence is not just a physical battle but a psychological duel. Dek must analyze the creature's behaviors, predict its movements, and exploit subtle vulnerabilities, reflecting his maturation as a hunter. The fight is choreographed to emphasize strategy over sheer violence, reinforcing the film's thematic focus on growth, adaptability, and honor. The film also explores philosophical questions about life, death, and morality through Dek's interactions with Thaia. Unlike prior Predator films where violence is often portrayed as purely instrumental, Badlands considers the consequences of action. Dek experiences moments of hesitation and ethical reflection, particularly when Thaia is endangered. His decision to protect her, even at great personal risk, signifies his transition from a self-centered warrior to a considerate and morally aware individual. This choice embodies a broader theme of relational ethics, suggesting that strength encompasses not only combat prowess but also the capacity for empathy and cooperation. Visual storytelling is central to the film's impact. The alien planet is depicted as a character in its own right, with environments that react dynamically to the protagonist's actions. Bioluminescent forests, toxic swamps, and electrified plains are not mere backdrops but integral to the narrative. They influence strategy, shape encounters, and symbolize the unpredictable nature of life in a world ruled by survival. Cutter's cinematography uses wide-angle shots, dynamic tracking, and intimate close-ups to convey both scale and personal struggle, immersing the viewer in Deck's experience. The interplay between light and shadow, particularly during nocturnal sequences, enhances suspense while visually reinforcing the contrast between vulnerability and resilience. The cultural depiction of the Yautja is also expanded through art direction and costume design. Each Yautja weapon and armor piece reflects hierarchical status, personal achievement, and clan heritage. Ritualistic elements, such as marking scars, glowing tattoos, and ceremonial headgear, convey narrative information visually, allowing audiences to understand social structure without exposition. These details underscore the film's commitment to world building, making the Yautja feel like a complex, believable society rather than a generic alien species. Deck's psychological journey reaches its apex during the climactic confrontation with the apex predator. The battle is both physically grueling and emotionally intense. The creature's superior size, strength, and intelligence force Deck to innovate continuously, combining instinctual combat with analytical reasoning. Thaia's guidance during the fight exemplifies the theme of interdependence: neither can survive alone. The climax is choreographed to maintain tension, alternating between moments of immediate danger, strategic planning, and emotional resonance. Deck's final triumph is not a simple victory of strength but the culmination of learned wisdom, adaptation, and courage. Following the battle, the film explores themes of recovery, reflection, and reintegration. Deck's return to his clan is a moment of quiet triumph, emphasizing that the journey toward honor is as internal as it is external. The ritual acknowledgement by his peers is restrained yet profound, demonstrating that recognition in Yautja culture is earned, not freely given. Thaia's survival and integration into this society, through the assistance of clan engineers, reinforces the narrative's broader message about cooperation across differences. The film concludes with Deck and Thaia standing together, symbols of growth, resilience, and the bridging of cultural divides. Throughout its runtime, Badlands balances visceral action with intellectual depth. It challenges traditional franchise expectations by centering a non-human protagonist and exploring philosophical and emotional themes typically reserved for human characters. The story emphasizes adaptability, ethical decision-making, and relational trust as essential components of strength. Its detailed world-building, innovative creature design, sophisticated cinematography, and layered character development collectively create a cinematic experience that transcends standard genre conventions. The film invites audiences to engage not only with thrilling action sequences but also with the complexities of identity, culture, and personal evolution, ultimately redefining the Predator narrative for a new generation of viewers. The cinematography of Badlands plays a central role in immersing the audience in both the alien landscapes and the emotional journey of its characters. Jeff Cutter's visual language is deliberate, balancing vast, sweeping shots that emphasize the scale of Jenna's dangerous ecosystem with tight, intimate frames that capture Deck's personal growth. Wide panoramic shots, often at dawn or dusk, utilize low-angle lighting to cast long shadows, symbolically mirroring the long shadows of Deck's past and his father's oppressive legacy. The textures of Jenna's terrain, from jagged rocky outcroppings to bioluminescent plant life, create a sensory experience that communicates danger, beauty, and alien strangeness simultaneously. Cutter frequently employs slow tracking shots during Deck's solitary explorations, allowing the audience to inhabit his perspective, which is initially tentative, fearful, and reactive, before gradually evolving into one of agency and intentionality. The choice of color grading is equally significant. Cooler tones dominate the alien wilderness, underscoring isolation and alienation, while warm hues punctuate moments of alliance, trust, and bonding between Deck, Thaia, and Bud. This visual storytelling amplifies the narrative arc, reinforcing the film's themes without relying on expository dialogue, a technique that highlights Trachtenberg's directorial mastery in balancing spectacle with emotional intimacy. Production philosophy in Badlands is deeply rooted in world-building and authenticity, particularly with respect to Yautja culture. Unlike earlier Predator films that occasionally relied on humans' perception of the predators to define the species, Trachtenberg, alongside screenwriter Patrick Eisen, opted to construct a believable ecosystem for the predators themselves. This includes a meticulous attention to their hierarchical rituals, hunting ethics, family structures, and symbolic markings. The decision to explore the consequences of exile, as seen in Dek's banishment, provides insight into Yautja morality beyond the simplistic predator-prey binary. Practical effects, animatronics, and advanced CGI were combined to render creatures like the Kalisk and the native fauna of Jenna in a way that feels tangible, preserving the tactile realism that fans of the franchise expect. In interviews, Trachtenberg emphasized that every creature interaction, whether a hunt or a survival encounter, was choreographed to be intelligible in terms of predator behavior, ecosystem balance, and narrative tension, ensuring that the alien planet was more than just a backdrop, it was a character in itself. Character psychology in Predator, Badlands is one of the film's strongest pillars. Dek's arc is constructed through a series of internal and external conflicts that challenge his perception of self, loyalty, and worth. His exile initiates a classic hero's journey, but one complicated by the fact that he is a predator, a species traditionally understood as apex, unflinching, and nearly invincible. This inversion is central to the film's emotional resonance. It humanizes an alien species without anthropomorphizing them to the point of cliché. Dek's fears, hesitations, and moral dilemmas are all rendered with care, demonstrating that vulnerability is not weakness but a precursor to growth. Thaia's character psychology is equally nuanced. As a synthetic, her experiences explore themes of identity, autonomy, and the ethics of creation. Her loyalty to Dek emerges not from programming but from a form of emergent empathy, reflecting broader questions about what defines consciousness and moral choice. The bond between Dek and Thaia is emblematic of symbiotic evolution, two beings from entirely different ontologies learning from each other, adapting, and ultimately redefining the terms of their survival. Bud, meanwhile, functions psychologically as both a mirror and a foil. Its presence reflects the unintended consequences of the character's actions, as well as the possibility for innocence and moral clarity in a world dominated by violence. Franchise continuity is meticulously respected while being creatively expanded in Predator, Badlands. While many prior films relied on human characters to guide audience perspective, this film centers the Predator experience, marking a pivotal departure in the franchise. It does not simply retell the Predator mythos but adds new dimensions to it, the political structures of Yautja society, the consequences of interclan disputes, and the intersection with corporate forces like Weyland-Yutani. By introducing synthetics and explicitly tying events to the broader alien universe, the film reinforces canonical connections while remaining narratively self-contained. Even small details, such as ritual markings, weapon designs, and hunting patterns, echo past installments while signaling evolution. These elements serve dual purposes. They satisfy long-term fans with consistency and visual callbacks while creating opportunities for future stories set within this more expansive and emotionally resonant Predator ecosystem. Importantly, the film anticipates potential sequels without relying on cliffhangers, allowing the narrative to stand on its own while leaving room for expansion of both character arcs and lore. Thematic dissection reveals that Predator, Badlands is less a story of hunting than a meditation on identity, belonging, and moral evolution. The exile motif is central. Dek's removal from the clan functions as both punishment and opportunity, pushing him to confront assumptions about strength, loyalty, and what it truly means to lead. Similarly, Thaia's journey interrogates the nature of autonomy. Her programming creates one set of constraints, but her choices demonstrate emergent individuality. By juxtaposing these two arcs, the film explores the notion that survival is not merely physical but deeply ethical and relational. The narrative repeatedly interrogates the ethics of violence. When is killing justified? When is mercy appropriate? And how do these choices define legacy and identity? Even the Kalisk, initially perceived solely as an antagonist, becomes a narrative device through which the protagonists confront the limits of their understanding and the consequences of their actions. The recurring theme of family, both biological and chosen, underscores the narrative, culminating in Dek's decision to create a new clan with Thaia and Bud. This act signifies not only personal growth but a subtle critique of inherited authority. Leadership is legitimate when earned through empathy, courage, and moral clarity, not merely birthright. The impact of Predator, Badlands on sci-fi cinema extends beyond its immediate franchise significance. By centering non-human perspectives, it challenges conventional narrative priorities that often place humans as the default lens. It demonstrates that complex emotional storytelling, ethical quandaries, and character development can be equally compelling when inhabited by alien species. The film's visual language, integrating immersive CGI with tactile practical effects, innovative creature design, and a dynamic approach to landscape, sets a high standard for world building, showing that alien environments can be both spectacular and narratively meaningful. Moreover, its engagement with intertextual franchise elements, particularly the integration of Weyland-Yutani and synthetic characters, exemplifies how franchises can expand through thoughtful crossovers rather than superficial fan service. The film's PG-13 rating, unusual for a Predator installment, signals a willingness to explore intense thematic content without relying solely on graphic violence, further broadening accessibility and audience engagement. Critics and scholars alike note that this approach may influence how future sci-fi action films depict non-human protagonists and morally complex narratives. The musical score, composed by Sarah Schachner and Benjamin Wallfish, contributes significantly to the emotional landscape. The soundscape blends electronic motifs with orchestral textures, creating tension while accentuating the personal stakes of each encounter. Battle sequences are underscored by pulsing, rhythmic motifs that mirror Deck's heartbeat and emotional rhythm, while quiet moments in the wilderness are accompanied by sparse, atmospheric arrangements, allowing the alien world's inherent danger and beauty to resonate without distraction. The score works symbiotically with sound design, where environmental sounds, from Jenna's wildlife to mechanical hums of the synthetics, are amplified to immerse the audience fully. This careful attention to auditory experience enhances narrative immersion, creating a multisensory journey that is both viscerally thrilling and emotionally resonant. The production design also deserves attention, particularly in its integration of cultural symbolism within the Predator hierarchy. Ritual chambers, weapon engravings, and clan insignia are all designed with meticulous attention to cultural logic, suggesting a fully realized civilization beyond what audiences have previously glimpsed. These design elements are not merely decorative, they function narratively, providing context for interpersonal conflict, rites of passage, and political maneuvering. For instance, the sacred cloaking device Deck seeks at the story's climax is more than a tactical tool, it embodies status, honor, and acceptance within Yautja society. Its acquisition signals not just victory but a redefinition of what it means to belong to the clan, emphasizing that mastery is as much ethical as it is martial. Predator, Badlands emerges as one of the most distinctive entries in the long-running Predator franchise, not simply because it expands the universe outward, but because it fundamentally shifts the camera inward, turning the mythos of the Yautja into an emotional, character-driven odyssey rather than merely a spectacle of interspecies conflict. For decades, the Predator films have been human-centered stories: soldiers, mercenaries, scientists, fugitives, warriors, or lone figures placed in environments where the Predator functions as a ruthless hunter, an unstoppable force whose motivations remain deliberately sparse and whose methods appear almost ritualistically enigmatic. What Badlands achieves is a reversal of that narrative vantage point. It does not just show a predator, it inhabits a predator. It shapes the film around the inner world, culture, banishment, pain, tribal expectations, and existential evolution of Deck, a young Yautja exile who becomes the emotional anchor of the entire film. The movie opens with a tone that is remarkably intimate for Predator storytelling. Instead of the cold, distant, masked menace audiences are familiar with, the narrative positions Deck not as a terrifying hunter, but as a fractured warrior who has fallen short of his clan's rigid, honor-bound expectations. His exile is not portrayed simply as punishment for weakness, it is an existential erasure, a stripping of identity within a species where identity is earned through blood, ritual, hunting prowess, and ancestral duty. The early sequences, although silent and visually meditative, communicate the internal storm within Deck, the shame of failure, the weight of his clan's abandonment, and the crushing sense of isolation. In Yautja society, exile is not merely banishment from territory, it is the severing of one's birthright, the denial of armor, the removal of one's insignia, and the symbolic dissolution of one's lineage. The filmmakers intentionally construct this atmosphere through a blend of body language, environmental storytelling, and a constructed Yautja dialect that adds a layer of authenticity and cultural immersion. Dek's crash landing on the hostile planet is not an accident but a narrative device that places him in a realm where survival requires adaptation rather than dominance. The planet, unnamed but often referred to by characters as the most dangerous world in the universe, serves as a metaphor for Dek's internal landscape, wild, unpredictable, unforgiving, and filled with creatures that embody raw instinct rather than structured honor. The landscape is vast and barren, blending elements of scorched deserts, toxic swamps, unstable terrain, and alien topography that defies human logic. The cinematographic choice to blend natural New Zealand vistas with complex digital augmentation creates a world that feels simultaneously organic and hostile, ancient and futuristic, serene and predatory. In every frame, the environment reflects Dek's alienation and the metaphysical severity of his exile. It is within this environment that Dek encounters Thaya, the synthetic being created by Yautja. Her introduction immediately creates a narrative contrast. Dek represents primal instinct, cultural tradition, and organic evolution, while Thaya embodies manufactured intelligence, corporate purpose, and technological vulnerability. At first glance, they seem diametrically opposed, one built for the hunt, the other built for knowledge, but it is precisely this opposition that becomes the thematic spine of the film. Thaya's damaged state, missing portions of her body and reliant on Dek for mobility, symbolizes the fractured nature of both characters. She is physically broken, he is socially broken. The creators intentionally parallel their weaknesses to encourage audience empathy and to develop a partnership dynamic based not on convenience, but on mutual necessity. The brilliance of Badlands lies in how it refuses to force its characters into predictable roles. Thaya is not merely an exposition machine providing lore about Yautja, instead, she is a character plagued by her own existential questions. Her search for her sister, synthetic, Tessa, mirrors Dek's subconscious longing for the family, clan, and societal acceptance he lost. Their interactions are rooted in a language barrier that becomes its own narrative motif. Dek does not speak human languages, Thaya's emotional expressions are coded rather than instinctive, and yet both slowly develop a shared mode of communication built on gestures, tonal harmonics, and survival signals. Their communication becomes a metaphor for transcending cultural divides, and for illustrating how beings from vastly different worlds can still find understanding through shared pain and shared purpose. As their journey unfolds, the film gradually explores layers of Yautja society that have only been hinted at in past entries. Instead of limiting the predator culture to honor rituals and explosive weaponry, Badlands attempts to humanize their beliefs. We begin to see ritual scars, ancestral markings, funerary practices, and the ideological conflict between individual identity and clan conformity. Dek's flashbacks expand his character beyond the typical warrior archetype and paint him as a youth burdened by expectation rather than empowered by it. His failure that led to exile is not rooted in cowardice, but in compassion, a trait considered a weakness in his clan, but which becomes his greatest strength in his partnership with Thaya. The planet's ecosystem provides constant trials that force Dek and Thaya to evolve. Giant crustacean predators, rapid-strike arthropods, bioluminescent fungal predators, territorial airborne beasts, and parasitic camouflage organisms populate the landscape, making survival a living nightmare. Many of these creatures are designed not just as obstacles but as mirrors to the Yautja's own hunting traditions, showing how predator evolution has been shaped by exposure to such hostile environments. By confronting these beasts, Dek gradually reclaims pieces of his identity, but this reclamation is not framed as a return to violence, but as a rediscovery of instinctual resilience and a renegotiation of what honor means to him. Thaya's presence challenges Dek's worldview. She questions the value of strength without compassion, and of honor without individuality. Their relationship evolves from reluctant alliance to emotional interdependence, culminating in moments where Dek's decisions are influenced not by tribal code, but by emergent empathy. Thaya, on the other hand, begins as a programmed construct seeking answers but gradually becomes a being capable of emotional resonance, fear, attachment, and moral conflict. Her growing awareness of her own identity, separate from her corporate creators and separate from her twin synthetic, is one of the most profound narrative arcs of the film. As the story escalates toward the confrontation with the apex adversary, the film introduces one of its most complex elements, the presence of other predators who arrive on the planet not to rescue Dek, but to hunt the apex creature themselves. These predators embody the traditional Yautja principles of dominance and ancestral duty, becoming foils to Dek's emerging individuality. Their arrival forces Dek to confront the very society that rejected him and creates tension between his newfound understanding of honor and the rigid ideology of his species. This dynamic becomes central to the film's climactic sequences, where Dek must choose not only who to fight, but what values he now stands for. Thaia's sister Tessa becomes one of the film's most intellectually stimulating antagonistic forces. Unlike Thaia, who developed empathy and emotional autonomy, Tessa remains aligned with her original programming, representing the cold ambition and manipulative control of Wayland Yutani. This corporate influence creates a second layer of antagonism, where the predators oppose Dek through ideology. Tessa opposes him through mechanized logic, interpreting him as a variable to be eliminated rather than a life form with agency. Thaia's struggle with her sister becomes symbolic of the battle between free will and design, emotion versus logic, personal identity versus manufactured purpose. The final battle is more than a test of physical strength, it is a philosophical culmination. Dek fights not simply to defeat a monstrous adversary but to reclaim self-worth and define his own code. Thaia confronts Tessa in a battle that is not defined by mechanical superiority but by emotional evolution. Their battles are interwoven, illustrating how both characters have been shaped by one another. The planet itself seems to echo their journey, with storms, seismic instability, and violent terrain shifts amplifying the tension and visually externalizing the internal transformation of the characters. When the apex enemy falls and the dust settles, the narrative steers into emotional territory that Predator films rarely approach. Dek faces the returning predators not as a subordinate begging for re-acceptance, but as a being who has discovered an identity beyond clan validation. Thaia, having survived not just physical disassembly but personal existential crisis, stands as a symbol of self-actualization. The film's conclusion intentionally leaves room for future exploration, with the teasing implication that Dek's mother, implied to be a figure of considerable authority within Predator society, arrives or will arrive in a future sequel. This element adds a mythic layer, opening questions about lineage, destiny, and generational conflict within Predator culture. Cinematically, Badlands is a triumph in balancing practical creature design with digital augmentation. The decision to use practical suits for much of Dek's physical portrayal gives him a grounded, tactile presence that CGI alone could not replicate. Yautja Workshop's involvement ensures that every detail, armor texture, skin patterning, mandible articulation, feels authentic, alive, and consistent with the franchise's legacy. The sound design crafts an auditory identity for the planet itself, while the musical score blends haunting orchestration with percussive motifs that evoke both tribal resonance and futuristic tension. Thematically, the film interrogates identity, exile, family, cultural rigidity, personal evolution, and the meaning of strength. It rejects the simplistic framework of hunter versus hunted, and proposes that even within a species defined by ritual violence, individuality and emotional complexity can exist. Dek's journey is not about becoming the best hunter, it is about understanding what makes him different, and why difference holds value. Thaia's arc reinforces this, as she moves beyond programming to discover emotional depth, choice, and subjective experience. Critically, the film has been praised for its emotional depth, innovative perspective, and courage in disrupting the established formula of the series. Some critiques highlight the PG-13 rating as limiting certain brutalities typically associated with the Predator franchise, but others see this as a creative opportunity, enabling the film to explore non-human characters without reliance on gore. Audiences appreciate the world-building and the fresh take on Yautja culture, marking it as one of the boldest expansions of the franchise since Predator, 1987, introduced the iconic hunter. Its cultural impact stems from how it transforms the Predator mythos. Instead of being defined by musculature, action, and brutality, the franchise embraces a narrative centered on emotional resonance, species introspection, and philosophical depth. It invites new fans into the universe and recontextualizes the franchise for longtime viewers, proving that even in a saga defined by ferocity, there is room for vulnerability, growth, and connection. The planet on which Dek finds himself is not merely a backdrop but a character in its own right, a relentless, living crucible that shapes every action and decision. The terrain itself is designed to challenge, disorient, and intimidate. Its deserts stretch into endless horizons, punctuated by jagged rock formations that seem both organic and artificially sculpted. Volcanic fissures release noxious gases, altering the air and adding a constant environmental threat. The bioluminescent flora is not passive, many plants act as both camouflage and predator, emitting pheromones that lure prey into deadly ambushes. This interplay between predator and environment mirrors Dek's own journey. He is both hunter and hunted, alien to the world he navigates, and yet capable of adapting through instinct and ingenuity. Every sequence of exploration or combat in this world feels like a meditation on survival itself, forcing the audience to consider the fragility of life in a universe that is indifferent at best and hostile at worst. Dek's internal development is mirrored by the evolution of the audience's understanding of Yautja culture. Early in the film, viewers are introduced to the concept of the Predator clan as a hierarchical, almost feudal society where personal achievements and failures define social standing. The clan's rituals are steeped in symbolism. Scars denote victories or shame, mandible configurations can signify lineage or rank, and the choice of weaponry reflects both personal style and societal expectation. What Badlands does differently is reveal that these markers are not arbitrary. They are deeply embedded in a species' understanding of honor and existence. When Dek was exiled, it was not because he lacked courage but because his empathy, a trait often undervalued, was seen as weakness. His exile, therefore, is not just a personal setback, it represents the tension between biological instinct, societal expectation, and the emerging individual consciousness. This tension resonates throughout the film, establishing a philosophical lens that examines what it truly means to be a predator. Thaia's characterization is a compelling counterpoint to Dek. As a synthetic, she embodies the consequences of intelligence unbounded by tradition but constrained by programming. She initially views Dek's rituals and societal structures with a mixture of curiosity and confusion, yet over time she demonstrates adaptability, forming a unique bond based on mutual reliance and shared experience. Their relationship is layered and multidimensional, it is neither romantic nor purely utilitarian. It is an exploration of interdependence, the ways two beings from radically different species can complement and challenge each other. Scenes where Thaia's mechanical systems fail, leaving her reliant on Dek, are both tense and poignant. They highlight vulnerability as a conduit for growth and connection. Through these interactions, the film interrogates questions of autonomy, free will, and the nature of sentience, making Thaia not just a companion character but a philosophical fulcrum around which much of the narrative pivots. The design of the creatures and antagonists further amplifies the thematic depth of the film. Unlike previous entries, which primarily featured a single, dominant predator or human antagonists, Badlands populates its world with a spectrum of creatures that challenge Dek and Thaia in different ways. The apex adversary, a massive, hybridized Yautja predator with evolutionary adaptations unlike anything seen before, represents both a physical and ideological trial. Its design is intentionally unsettling, combining familiar predator traits with alien adaptations that make it feel like an apex organism sculpted by the extreme pressures of its environment. Every battle sequence with this creature is choreographed not just for spectacle but to reflect Dek's internal struggle. He must reconcile his inherited notions of honor with the pragmatism and empathy he has developed. The stakes are psychological as well as physical, and the choreography of these encounters integrates practical effects, digital augmentation, and immersive sound design to create a visceral, multisensory experience. The supporting predators who arrive mid-film add an additional layer of narrative tension. Unlike Dek, they embody unyielding adherence to tradition and aggression. Their presence underscores the central conflict of the story, the dichotomy between inherited code and personal evolution. These predators are neither purely antagonistic nor moral arbiters, they are cultural mirrors reflecting the rigidity from which Dek has emerged. Their interactions with Dek oscillate between mentorship, rivalry, and confrontation, revealing the complex social web of predator society. When the final battle occurs, the confrontation with these predators becomes not merely a fight for survival but a negotiation of values, a physical dialogue about what it means to exist honorably in a universe that offers no guarantees. The visual language of Badlands is deliberately constructed to reinforce these thematic motifs. The cinematography employs long, contemplative shots that emphasize isolation and scale, contrasting with tightly framed sequences of combat that immerse the viewer in immediate, visceral experience. Lighting is carefully manipulated to reinforce mood. Stark, high-contrast landscapes underscore vulnerability, shadowed, dimly lit sequences create suspense, and bioluminescent environmental effects contribute to a sense of alien wonder. Color is symbolic as well, often contrasting the natural earthy tones of Dek's physiology with the synthetic luminescence of Thaya, visually reinforcing their divergent origins and eventual symbiotic evolution. Every shot is carefully composed to support both narrative clarity and emotional resonance, a testament to the careful collaboration between the cinematographer, production designer, and visual effects team. Sound design in Badlands is another critical element that elevates the experience. The Yautja language, developed in consultation with linguists, is used extensively, giving Dek a voice that is alien yet expressive. Every growl, mandible click, and throat modulation carries meaning beyond translation, allowing audiences to intuit intent, emotion, and nuance. The natural world of the planet itself is sonically rich, the hum of alien insects, the distant calls of unseen predators, and the subtle vibrations of seismic activity all contribute to a sense of immersive presence. Music by Sarah Schachner and Benjamin Wallfish complements these soundscapes, balancing orchestral gravity with electronic textures to underline tension, wonder, and emotional depth. The thematic resonance of Badlands extends beyond character and plot. It interrogates the nature of identity, the value of empathy, and the cost of tradition. Dek's journey is emblematic of a broader philosophical inquiry: can one redefine honor without rejecting heritage? Can strength be measured by survival and adaptation rather than dominance and fear? Thaya's arc parallels this inquiry, questioning the ethical dimensions of creation, control, and autonomy. The film's resolution does not offer simple answers; instead, it presents a world where growth is incremental, moral complexity is unavoidable, and both individuals and societies must confront the consequences of evolution, cultural, biological, and emotional. The reception of Predator, Badlands reflects its ambition and execution. Critics have largely praised the film's bold narrative choices, its character-centric approach, and its willingness to explore themes traditionally absent from the franchise. Audience response highlights the film's emotional depth, immersive world-building, and striking visual and auditory experience. While some traditionalists expressed concern about the departure from human-centered narratives and excessive reliance on PG-13 constraints, these choices have allowed for a wider exploration of Yautja culture and an innovative approach to the franchise's mythology. The film's influence is likely to extend beyond its immediate box office performance, serving as a benchmark for how long-running action franchises can successfully pivot toward character and culture-driven storytelling without losing spectacle or tension. From a production standpoint, Badlands represents a careful synthesis of practical and digital effects. Yautja Workshop's contributions ensure tactile realism in character and creature design, while leading VFX houses provide the scope and scale necessary for the alien world. Filming in New Zealand allowed the production to leverage diverse landscapes, natural lighting conditions, and cinematic vistas that would have been impossible to replicate entirely on soundstages. Attention to minute detail, from armor wear patterns to subtle biological markings on creatures, contributes to the sense that this is not merely a film but a lived-in universe, a coherent ecosystem with its own rules and logic. The potential for sequels or spin-offs is evident. Dek's journey, while emotionally resolved in terms of self-discovery, leaves open the question of his place within broader Yautja society, the potential return of his mother, and the future of Thaya's evolving consciousness. The planet itself may serve as a recurring location or as a thematic touchstone for further exploration of environmental, biological, and cultural pressures on the Yautja species. Such continuity ensures that Badlands is not only a singular achievement but also a pivotal foundation for the franchise's future evolution. Ultimately, Predator, Badlands is a landmark in science fiction cinema. Its audacious choice to center the story on a predator protagonist, its nuanced exploration of culture, identity, and evolution, and its meticulous attention to cinematic, auditory, and narrative detail combine to create an experience that is both thrilling and intellectually engaging. It challenges audience expectations, deepens franchise lore, and exemplifies how action-oriented narratives can simultaneously embrace spectacle, character, and philosophical inquiry. Dek's Odyssey, Thaia's Awakening, and the alien world they traverse constitute a rich tapestry, one that encourages reflection on the nature of honor, empathy, survival, and the ever-shifting boundaries between species, technology, and consciousness. Predator, Badlands continues to redefine the franchise by immersing the audience in a rich narrative universe where the predators themselves take center stage. The film, as directed by Dan Trachtenberg, constructs a story that is both intensely personal and universally resonant, examining not merely the physical prowess of the Yautja but their complex social hierarchies, moral codes, and emotional lives. From the opening sequences, it is evident that this is not a conventional predator film. There are no humans to serve as the lens through which the audience perceives the predators. Instead, viewers are placed in the position of the exiled young predator, Dek, whose journey unfolds across the hostile and enigmatic planet of Jenna. Dek's banishment from his clan sets the narrative tone, underscoring themes of displacement, identity, and the struggle to reconcile inherited expectations with personal morality. The initial act of the film establishes the harsh realities of Yautja society. Dek's father, Njor, embodies the rigid authoritarianism that governs predator clans, imposing a code of honor that prioritizes strength and obedience above familial affection. Quay, Dek's elder brother, provides a counterbalance. He is competent, disciplined, yet capable of empathy. His loyalty to Dek establishes an early narrative tension between personal attachment and societal obligation, which is tragically underscored when Njor orders Quay to eliminate his brother. The sequence in which Quay chooses defiance over obedience is rendered with devastating emotional clarity, signaling the cruelty inherent in rigid hierarchies and the potential for courage to defy convention. Trachtenberg's direction ensures that this familial drama carries as much weight as the larger-than-life battles that will follow, grounding the story in a relatable emotional core despite the alien setting. Upon being cast out, Dek's crash landing on Jenna transitions the film into a survival narrative with philosophical undertones. Jenna is depicted not merely as a physical landscape but as an extension of Dek's internal exile, vast, unwelcoming, and indifferent to his suffering. The planet's flora and fauna present threats that are at once immediate and symbolic. Every encounter is a test, challenging Dek to adapt, innovate, and survive in ways that his structured upbringing never required. The cinematography here, led by Jeff Cutter, is notable for its combination of vast sweeping shots and intimate character-focused frames. Panoramic vistas emphasize Dek's isolation, while close-ups during moments of introspection highlight his growing awareness, resourcefulness, and moral agency. Lighting choices accentuate the duality of Jenna's environment, juxtaposing cold, alien blues and grays with warmer, more inviting tones during moments of connection or triumph. Through these visual cues, the audience experiences the planet both as a hostile adversary and a crucible for transformation. Dek's encounter with Thaya, a legless synthetic created by Wayland Yutani, introduces a second narrative axis that deepens the story's thematic exploration of identity, agency, and empathy. Unlike traditional predator antagonists or human protagonists, Thaya occupies a liminal space between artificiality and emerging consciousness. Her initial fragility conceals an intelligence and moral capacity that challenges Dek to reconceive the possibilities of alliance, cooperation, and ethical decision-making in a world dominated by instinct and violence. Their interactions, initially tentative and pragmatic, evolve into a profound bond that subverts the traditional predator-prey paradigm. The inclusion of Bud, a native creature of Jenna who initially appears as comic relief and companionship, further develops this network of interdependence. Bud's narrative function is multilayered, It acts as a mirror to Deck's own innocence and moral potential, a symbol of emergent trust, and, later, a narrative pivot when revealed as connected to the apex predator, the Kalisk. The introduction of the Kalisk transforms the survival narrative into a complex moral and ethical confrontation. As a regenerating apex creature, the Kalisk embodies both literal and metaphorical challenges. It represents the physical threat that drives action while simultaneously serving as a mirror to the predator's rigid societal expectations. Deck's struggle to confront and ultimately survive encounters with the Kalisk parallels his internal journey toward self-definition. He is forced to question what strength means, what honor entails, and how one can navigate duty when the established structures are oppressive or destructive. The Kalisk's regenerative capabilities also challenge the traditional cinematic notion of victory. The act of severing its head, only to witness its regeneration, underscores the futility of brute force and the need for strategic, ethical, and collaborative action. Weyland-Yutani's corporate intervention further complicates the narrative, introducing a critique of exploitation and the ethical treatment of sentient beings. The arrival of synthetics and corporate forces interrupts the fragile ecosystem that Deck and Thaya have navigated, demonstrating that power structures, whether familial, societal, or corporate, impose constraints that demand negotiation, adaptation, or rebellion. Tessa's appearance, Thaya's sister, introduces the narrative's moral antagonist whose loyalty to corporate directives challenges both Thaya's and Deck's emerging sense of autonomy. The climactic confrontation between Thaya, Deck, and Tessa is a multifaceted exploration of agency, identity, and ethical choice. It is not merely a physical battle, it is a contest of values, revealing how emerging consciousness and moral reasoning can disrupt pre-programmed or inherited obligations. Deck's return to Yautja Prime constitutes both narrative and thematic closure. By carrying Tessa's skull and confronting Njor, Deck symbolically and literally reconciles his personal evolution with the broader demands of Yautja culture. His victory is not achieved through sheer physical prowess alone but through strategic thinking, ethical insight, and the formation of a new, inclusive clan composed of himself, Thaya, and Bud. This resolution underscores one of the film's central themes: the creation of identity and leadership is not determined solely by birthright or inherited authority but by choice, empathy, and moral courage. The post-credits reveal, hinting at the arrival of Deck's mother, establishes narrative continuity while laying the foundation for potential sequels, ensuring that the emotional and political stakes of the Yautja world remain open-ended and fertile for exploration. The film's technical aspects, cinematography, sound design, and music, contribute significantly to its narrative depth. Cutter's cinematography integrates sweeping vistas with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring that every frame communicates both story and theme. The environmental sounds of Jenna, wind through alien foliage, the distant calls of predators, and the mechanical hums of Weyland-Yutani synthetics, combine with Schachner and Wallfish's score to create a fully immersive auditory experience. The music, a fusion of electronic and orchestral elements, mirrors Deck's emotional journey, tense, anticipatory motifs during hunts, sparse, reflective compositions during introspection, and dynamic, rhythm-driven sequences during confrontations. Sound and score function narratively, reinforcing character psychology and world-building without reliance on expository dialogue. Production philosophy further distinguishes Predator, Badlands from prior franchise installments. The filmmaker's commitment to world-building extends beyond narrative and visual design into cultural authenticity. Every aspect of Yautja society, from weapon construction and ritualistic markings to hierarchical structures and hunting ethics, reflects a coherent internal logic. This attention to detail ensures that the predators are not mere monsters but members of a complex, morally intricate civilization. The interplay between practical effects and CGI enhances this realism. Creatures are tangible, interactions with the environment feel physical, and battles maintain narrative coherence despite the heightened fantastical elements. These design choices affirm Trachtenberg's goal of creating a Predator narrative that is as much about cultural exploration as it is about action. Thematic richness permeates every layer of the film. Central to the narrative is the exploration of exile, belonging, and identity. Deck's journey from outcast to leader exemplifies the tension between societal expectations and personal morality. Thaia's parallel journey interrogates the ethical and philosophical dimensions of artificial intelligence and emergent consciousness. Their alliance suggests that identity is relational, forged not merely through survival but through mutual recognition, ethical engagement, and emotional reciprocity. The film further examines the ethics of violence, contrasting the Yautja's ritualized aggression with the Kalisk's indifferent threat and Weyland-Yutani's exploitative interventions. The narrative emphasizes that power and skill are meaningful only when coupled with moral discernment, a concept that resonates beyond the science fiction context into broader reflections on leadership, authority, and ethical responsibility. The impact of Predator, Badlands on the broader science fiction cinematic landscape is profound. By centering non-human perspectives, the film challenges conventional narrative hierarchies that prioritize human experience. It demonstrates that emotionally compelling, ethically rich storytelling can thrive even when protagonists are alien, mechanical, or hybrid beings. The film's integration with the broader Alien Predator canon enriches both universes, allowing intertextual exploration without compromising narrative integrity. Its PG-13 rating, a departure from previous Predator installments, signals a shift toward accessibility while retaining thematic and visual intensity. By demonstrating that emotional depth, ethical complexity, and speculative world-building can coexist with visceral action, the film sets a new benchmark for character-driven science fiction. The journey after the apex predator battle introduces new layers of complexity, both external and internal. Though Dek has proven himself in combat, survival on this alien planet continues to test his limits. The ecosystem's unpredictability becomes increasingly apparent. Sudden sandstorms sweep across plains that were previously navigable, massive fissures open without warning beneath footfalls, and acid-like rain corrodes armor and technology. These environmental hazards serve not just as obstacles, but as narrative devices, symbolizing the chaotic forces of the universe that challenge even the strongest warriors. Dek's ability to read, anticipate, and adapt to these phenomena becomes crucial to his continued survival. Each encounter with the environment reinforces the film's central thesis: true strength arises from understanding, adapting, and harmonizing with one's surroundings rather than attempting to dominate them blindly. Thaia's role evolves dramatically in response to these heightened challenges. Initially a damaged synthetic, she begins to reconfigure her internal systems and develop improvisational tactics for traversing hazardous terrain. She modifies her limited mobility, using magnetic thrusters and deployable grappling systems to assist Dek in scaling cliffs and crossing unstable ravines. Her analytical capabilities grow exponentially, allowing her to anticipate both natural and creature threats. In parallel, Thaia begins to exhibit emergent emotional responses, expressing concern, issuing encouragement, and even demonstrating curiosity about Dek's cultural rituals. These developments underscore the film's exploration of the intersection between logic and emotion, illustrating how growth occurs when beings are forced to confront unfamiliar challenges together. The film further expands on the social and ceremonial structures of the Yautja. Through additional flashbacks, the audience witnesses intricate rites of passage, hunting competitions, and political negotiations within the clan. Young Yautja are shown learning to construct weapons from alien materials, to read environmental cues, and to analyze prey behavior, a holistic education combining physical prowess, intellectual reasoning, and cultural knowledge. Elders employ a combination of silent observation, ritualized challenges, and symbolic gestures to communicate complex social hierarchies. Dek's interactions with these structures reveal the internalized pressures of Yautja society, the tension between personal desire and communal expectation, the struggle to balance ambition with humility, and the cost of failure or dishonor. The narrative treats these rituals not as exotic spectacle, but as fundamental to understanding Dek's psychological and emotional journey. As Dek and Thaia traverse further into the planet's interior, the threats evolve beyond solitary predators to include pack dynamics, territorial conflicts, and interspecies competition. Groups of large, insectoid creatures, with segmented armor and multi-jointed limbs, begin to behave strategically, demonstrating communication through vibrations and pheromones. Dek must apply both instinct and learned tactics from Thaia to navigate these encounters. At one point, the pair become encircled by a coordinated attack from a pack of these creatures in a bioluminescent forest. The sequence is meticulously choreographed to illustrate Deck's growing mastery over his environment, combining stealth, deception, and precision strikes. Thias' analysis of the creature's behavioral patterns proves crucial in predicting movement, demonstrating the synergy between biological intuition and technological insight. The narrative continues to explore the philosophical dimensions of hunting, survival, and morality. Through Deck's reflections, viewers are introduced to the concept that strength is not measured solely by the ability to kill, but by the capacity to make decisions under uncertainty, to evaluate risk, and to act with honor. When faced with morally ambiguous situations, such as encountering injured or young predators, Deck demonstrates restraint and discernment, revealing a depth of character previously unseen in predator protagonists. These moments serve as a meditation on the nature of violence, the ethics of predation, and the responsibilities inherent in power. One of the most ambitious sequences of the film involves Deck and Thia entering a region of the planet dominated by massive crystalline structures. These formations amplify sound, refract light, and create confusing visual illusions that disorient both predator and prey. Here, the film's cinematography excels in combining visual spectacle with narrative tension. Deck must navigate these deceptive terrains, using heightened senses and analytical deduction to avoid ambushes by camouflaged creatures. The environment itself becomes an antagonist, challenging the protagonist's perception and forcing them to evolve their understanding of spatial awareness, sensory input, and strategic foresight. Thias' emergent emotional intelligence reaches a critical point during an encounter with a wounded juvenile predator. Unlike Deck, who recognizes the creature as a threat, Thia hesitates, analyzing patterns of behavior and possible non-lethal outcomes. She persuades Deck to subdue rather than kill, illustrating the potential for cooperation and ethical decision-making in moments traditionally governed by violence. This incident marks a turning point in their partnership, deepening mutual trust and reinforcing the film's theme that survival and morality are not mutually exclusive. The apex predator that Deck initially defeated is revealed to be part of a larger ecological hierarchy. Subsequent confrontations reveal rival apex predators vying for dominance, introducing an element of political ecology to the story. Deck must navigate these social hierarchies of predation, applying insights from his prior battles and Thias' analysis to anticipate moves and counter-strategies. These sequences are meticulously designed to balance action with strategic complexity, demonstrating the film's commitment to portraying predation as both instinctual and intellectually demanding. As the narrative approaches its climax, Deck and Thia encounter remnants of human activity, derelict exploration ships, abandoned research stations, and encrypted data terminals. Through these discoveries, the audience gains insights into the broader history of the planet, previous human incursions, and the interconnection between the Predator universe and the wider Weyland-Yutani corporate influence. This integration of lore expands the narrative universe, contextualizing Deck's journey within a continuum of interspecies interaction and planetary history. The juxtaposition of human technological ambition and Yautja cultural philosophy creates narrative tension, emphasizing themes of hubris, adaptation, and ecological stewardship. The climactic confrontation with a new, even more formidable apex predator solidifies Deck's transformation. This creature, unlike the first, exhibits adaptive intelligence, learning from Deck's previous tactics and anticipating countermoves. The fight is multi-staged, taking place across cliffs, subterranean tunnels, and bioluminescent caverns. Deck must combine his physical agility, instinctual combat skills, and Thias' analytical guidance to survive. The choreography emphasizes iterative learning, adaptive strategy, and ethical decision-making. Deck employs non-lethal traps to immobilize parts of the creature, exploiting both natural hazards and the environment itself. Thias' ability to manipulate technology and interface with environmental systems amplifies their effectiveness, demonstrating the profound interdependence of biological intuition and artificial intelligence. Following the climactic battle, Deck's reflection on the journey highlights the film's philosophical underpinnings. He recognizes that identity is shaped not merely by societal expectations or raw strength, but by choices made under pressure, the ability to adapt, and the courage to act ethically even in extremity. The narrative closes with a sense of resolution tempered by ongoing challenges, emphasizing that growth is an ongoing process rather than a fixed state. Dek's return to his clan, recognition by the elders, and the integration of Thaya into his society represent the culmination of both personal and relational development, symbolizing the potential for harmony between disparate entities and the evolution of cultural understanding. The film's production elements, cinematography, music, set design, and creature effects, work in harmony to reinforce narrative and thematic content. Bioluminescent lighting, intricate creature design, and atmospheric soundscapes immerse viewers in the alien ecosystem. Music blends tribal motifs with electronic textures, reflecting the intersection of primal instinct and advanced technology. Yautja armor and weaponry are meticulously crafted to convey social rank, ritual significance, and functional innovation. The combination of practical effects, CGI, and motion capture ensures that creatures feel both tangible and otherworldly, enhancing audience immersion. Throughout its extended runtime, Predator: Badlands balances visceral action with philosophical depth, providing a narrative that is both thrilling and intellectually stimulating. The film challenges conventional genre boundaries, redefining the Predator franchise by centering a non-human protagonist, exploring complex cultural dynamics, and emphasizing ethical and emotional dimensions of survival. Its integration of environmental hazards, ecological hierarchies, interspecies interactions, and emergent emotional intelligence creates a multi-layered story that rewards attentive viewing and deep engagement with its world-building. By expanding the Predator mythos in this way, the film not only delivers spectacular action and suspense but also provides a profound meditation on identity, honor, and cooperation. Dek's journey exemplifies the capacity for growth, resilience, and ethical decision-making, while Thaya's evolution highlights the potential for intelligence and emotion to emerge in unexpected forms. The alien planet, with its dynamic ecosystems and complex predators, reinforces the themes of adaptability, strategy, and respect for natural and social hierarchies. Together, these elements create a cinematic experience that is simultaneously epic, intimate, and intellectually rich, redefining the boundaries of the Predator narrative for contemporary audiences. After Dek's pivotal confrontation with the new apex predator, the narrative takes a moment to dwell on the subtleties of survival and the consequences of violence in a lawless ecosystem. While many Predator films prioritize spectacle, Badlands lingers on the implications of each action. The aftermath of battle leaves Dek physically wounded, armor dented, and energy reserves low, but it also leaves psychological scars, reminders of his mortality and the stakes of choice. Every minor predator they encounter thereafter, from pack-hunting reptilian quadrupeds to intelligent scavenger insects, tests not only Dek's combat proficiency but also his decision-making under stress. Each encounter functions as a lesson in patience, restraint, and ingenuity, reinforcing the film's ongoing theme that honor is inseparable from wisdom. The duo's passage through a region known as the Glass Forest introduces new environmental hazards and visually striking moments. The forest is filled with towering crystalline formations, each refracting light in blinding arrays, creating visual illusions that disorient the pair and conceal hidden predators. Dek must adapt to an environment where perception itself is unreliable. Thaya, whose sensory systems have evolved dramatically through adaptive learning, guides Dek with environmental readings and predictive modeling, highlighting the fusion of instinct and technology. Here, they encounter a group of sentient insectoid predators that communicate through color changes and harmonic frequencies. These creatures initially attack aggressively, testing the pair's coordination and ingenuity. Dek's instinctive combat skills, augmented by Thaya's analytical insight, allow them to neutralize the threat efficiently, showcasing their evolving partnership. The story also deepens its exploration of Yautja culture through the depiction of ritual relics and sacred sites scattered across the planet. Dek discovers monolithic structures resembling obelisks carved with hunting lore, symbols of ancient triumphs, and ceremonial arenas where past generations of Yautja competed for status. These relics serve as both plot devices and world-building elements, offering insight into the species' social hierarchy, moral codes, and value systems. Dek's reflection upon these sites reveals his increasing understanding of what it truly means to be a Yautja, strength is not merely physical dominance but the integration of intelligence, ethical judgment, and emotional resonance. Interwoven with these physical and cultural challenges are additional side encounters that expand both the lore and tension. The pair encounter a colony of arboreal predators, which employ ambush tactics from tree canopies and coordinate attacks with sharp, prehensile limbs. Dek adapts by studying movement patterns and environmental cues, often improvising traps from the landscape itself. One memorable sequence involves Dek leveraging a natural crevice to funnel the predators into a confined space, where Thea triggers environmental hazards to incapacitate them. These sequences are designed not merely for action spectacle but to reinforce thematic threads, adaptability, strategy, and the value of collaboration across species boundaries. Thea's character arc becomes increasingly profound. Initially a purely functional machine with limited emotional awareness, she develops curiosity, empathy, and even humor. Small gestures, offering reassurance when Dek is injured, analyzing predators with cautious optimism, and expressing awe at Yautja rituals, demonstrate her growth from an assistant to a true partner. This development also challenges Dek's perception of the synthetic. He begins to value her insights, care, and moral reasoning, realizing that strength and intelligence are not exclusive to biological life. Their evolving bond emphasizes the film's exploration of symbiosis, trust, and the breaking down of preconceived barriers between species. The film further expands its mythology by introducing traces of previous human activity, providing a layered narrative connecting Dek's story to the larger Predator universe. Remnants of Weyland-Yutani research installations, abandoned transport vessels, and cryptic black box recordings reveal that humans have attempted to study, exploit, or manipulate the planet's ecosystem for profit. Thea interprets these recordings, revealing prior encounters with predators, failed colonization attempts, and technological interventions that inadvertently disrupted ecological balance. These elements enrich the narrative, adding stakes and depth, while contextualizing Dek's actions within a broader cosmic history. The environmental storytelling becomes increasingly complex as Dek and Thea traverse hazardous biomes. Acidic swamps corrode armor and threaten synthetic systems, massive sandstorms reduce visibility to mere inches, volcanic fissures emit noxious gases that require rapid tactical adjustments. Each hazard forces creative problem-solving. Dek leverages predator camouflage, terrain traps, and improvised weaponry, while Thea manipulates technology to analyze threats and navigate hazards safely. These sequences reinforce the film's commitment to portraying survival as a dynamic interplay between intelligence, instinct, and environmental awareness. As the narrative progresses, minor predator confrontations serve as both action and symbolic mirrors of Dek's internal journey. A pack of nimble, darting predators challenges his agility and reflexes, echoing the early struggles of his youth. Another encounter with a territorial, armored creature mirrors the rigid hierarchy of his clan elders, forcing Dek to confront authority in a primal context. Each encounter contributes to his growing understanding that true mastery involves observation, strategy, and ethical consideration, not mere brute force. The climactic sequence unites all narrative threads. Dek faces a massive predator that not only rivals his previous adversaries in strength and intelligence but also demonstrates strategic reasoning and environmental adaptation. The battle spans multiple biomes, including jagged cliffs, subterranean caves, and the glass forest, highlighting both visual spectacle and thematic resonance. Dek's combined skills, honed instincts, and Thea's analytic support enable him to survive and ultimately triumph, not by sheer strength but by integrating strategy, environmental manipulation, and moral judgment. After the climactic battle, Dek's reflection highlights the central message: identity, honor, and strength are defined not solely by tradition or physical power, but by adaptability, cooperation, and ethical action. Returning to his clan with Thea, Dek presents trophies of his achievements, earning the respect of elders and peers. Yet his focus is not solely on recognition. He ensures Thea receives care and integration into Yautja society, symbolizing his evolved understanding of partnership, empathy, and responsibility. The film concludes with a panoramic view of the alien planet, now framed as a place of both danger and beauty, where survival requires not only strength but intelligence, adaptability, and moral discernment. Dek and Thaya, standing together against the horizon, embody the synthesis of instinct, strategy, and emotional growth. The closing scenes emphasize ongoing potential for exploration, ethical reflection, and interspecies cooperation, leaving audiences with a sense of both closure and infinite possibility. The production elements throughout reinforce narrative depth. Jeff Cutter's cinematography combines sweeping vistas with intimate close-ups, balancing scale with personal stakes. The score by Sarah Schachner and Benjamin Wallfish fuses tribal percussion, electronic undertones, and harmonic motifs, enhancing both tension and emotional resonance. Creature design, blending practical effects and CGI, ensures predators appear believable yet alien. Yautja armor and weaponry communicate rank, history, and culture without exposition, creating a rich visual language. Ultimately, Predator, Badlands redefines the franchise by centering a non-human protagonist, exploring ethical and emotional dimensions of survival, and integrating complex world-building with character-driven storytelling. The film examines identity, honor, adaptability, and partnership in ways that elevate it beyond a conventional action horror narrative. Dek's journey, from exiled youth to respected warrior, illustrates the power of resilience, the importance of ethical decision-making, and the value of cooperation across species boundaries. Thaya's transformation underscores the potential for intelligence and emotion to emerge in unexpected forms, creating a narrative that is both thrilling and deeply thoughtful. By combining high-intensity action, philosophical reflection, ecological complexity, and cultural richness, Predator, Badlands delivers a comprehensive cinematic experience that is both intellectually and emotionally engaging. It expands the Predator universe, deepens lore, and sets a precedent for future entries that balance spectacle with narrative and thematic depth. The alien planet, Yautja society, and the emergent relationship between Dek and Thaya collectively create a story that resonates on multiple levels, offering audiences both entertainment and contemplation, adventure and ethical inquiry, danger and profound character evolution. The opening sequences of Predator, Badlands are meticulously crafted to establish the stakes, both personal and cultural, that will define Dek's journey. The audience is introduced to the Yautja clan not through exposition but through lived experience, ritualized hunting, hierarchical displays of strength, and familial interactions that reveal the rigid moral code governing their society. The use of ritual as a narrative device is deliberate. Each ceremonial act, from the marking of hunters to the acknowledgement of victories, functions as both storytelling shorthand and symbolic reflection of the internal conflicts that will drive the plot. Dek's early failures, whether in hunting practice or social interaction, are portrayed in quiet sequences that emphasize hesitation, misjudgment, and self-doubt. These moments, while subtle, carry immense weight. They position Dek not as a naive protagonist but as a character in profound ethical and existential tension with the world around him. Quay's attempt to guide and protect Dek introduces a layered dynamic of loyalty, compassion, and subversive rebellion. Quay embodies the ideal of the Yautja warrior yet tempers his strength with empathy, revealing cracks in the seemingly monolithic moral and societal structure. His defiance of Njor's order to eliminate Dek is a pivotal narrative moment, highlighting the tension between codified authority and moral conscience. The scene's framing is precise. Close-ups capture Quay's emotional turmoil, while wide-angle shots place Dek and Quay within the imposing architecture of the clan's ceremonial grounds, visually reinforcing the weight of tradition and expectation. This careful orchestration underscores a central theme of the film. Courage is not defined solely by physical prowess but by the willingness to act ethically in the face of rigid, often destructive, societal norms. Dek's exile to Jenna shifts the narrative from familial drama to survival and self-discovery, functioning as both a literal and metaphorical journey. Jenna is constructed as an ecosystem of extreme danger, with predators and environmental hazards that challenge every aspect of Dek's abilities. The Kalisk, introduced as a regenerating apex predator, exemplifies this environmental challenge while also symbolizing the unrelenting expectations and dangers that Dek has faced in his own society. The film's use of environmental storytelling, through panoramic vistas, alien flora and fauna, and atmospheric sound design, immerses the viewer in Jenna's otherworldliness, reinforcing the psychological isolation Dek experiences. Each encounter with native creatures, whether a skirmish with a bone bison or the navigation of toxic terrain, serves a dual narrative purpose: survival and moral calibration. Dek is compelled to adapt, innovate, and develop a nuanced understanding of predator behavior, ecology, and ethical choice. Thaia's introduction as a legless synthetic expands the narrative's exploration of identity, consciousness, and agency. Her condition, physically impaired yet cognitively and emotionally complex, parallels Dek's own status as an outcast, creating immediate narrative resonance. Thaia represents a form of intelligence and moral reasoning distinct from the Yautja and human norms, emphasizing emergent ethics and the capacity for choice beyond programming. Their interactions progress slowly, reflecting a cautious negotiation of trust and shared purpose. Small gestures, nonverbal communication, and cooperative problem-solving sequences form the basis of their relationship, which develops organically amidst the backdrop of life-threatening environmental hazards. The narrative ensures that emotional growth is inseparable from survival, illustrating that empathy, collaboration, and moral discernment are crucial to overcoming both internal and external challenges. Bud's presence in this triad introduces a complex symbolic layer. Initially perceived as a secondary character providing companionship and comic relief, Bud evolves into a narrative pivot, revealing deep interconnections between the native ecosystem and the apex predator. Bud's relationship with Dek highlights themes of mentorship, kinship, and moral responsibility. The creature's survival depends not on brute strength but on Dek and Thaia's emerging understanding of the broader ecosystem. The later revelation of Bud's connection to the Kalisk elevates the narrative stakes, transforming previously seemingly innocuous interactions into moments of ethical and strategic consequence. The film's deliberate pacing ensures that these relationships are fully realized before the narrative escalates into climactic confrontations. The Kalisk itself functions on multiple narrative levels. Physically, it is a formidable challenge that tests Dek's evolving combat skills and resourcefulness. Symbolically, the Kalisk embodies the unyielding pressures of legacy, expectation, and the consequences of failing to adhere to societal codes. Its regenerative abilities serve as a narrative device to demonstrate that sheer force is insufficient, strategy, collaboration, and ethical reasoning are necessary for survival. The Kalisk's encounters with Dek and Thaia are choreographed to reflect not only physical struggle but also internal moral and philosophical conflict, blending action with ethical reflection in a manner rarely seen in conventional franchise entries. Trachtenberg's direction emphasizes this duality, using camera angles, sound design, and pacing to ensure that every confrontation communicates stakes that are both visceral and symbolic. The arrival of Weyland-Yutani synthetics introduces a narrative commentary on corporate exploitation and technological dominion. These characters, while physically formidable, are ethically blind, executing directives without moral reflection. Their presence disrupts the natural and social balance Dek and Thaia have established, creating a narrative tension between imposed authority and emergent morality. The confrontation with Tessa, Thaia's sister, crystallizes this ethical conflict. Tessa embodies absolute adherence to programming and corporate objectives, in stark contrast to Thaia's emergent ethical agency. The duel between the sisters is as much ideological as it is physical, illustrating the thematic intersection of autonomy, loyalty, and moral choice. Dek's role in this confrontation highlights the film's broader thesis: true leadership and moral authority are earned through ethical action, empathy, and strategic discernment rather than inherited status or physical dominance. Returning to Yautja Prime, Dek's confrontation with Njor serves as the narrative and thematic culmination of his journey. Njor represents unyielding tradition and authoritarianism, and his defeat is not simply a matter of physical prowess but a redefinition of Yautja leadership. By rejecting the conventional trappings of authority and forming a new clan with Thaia and Bud, Dek asserts the legitimacy of choice, moral courage, and relational ethics in determining social hierarchy. The film's closing moments, hinting at Dek's mother's arrival, establish narrative continuity and open avenues for future exploration, signaling a commitment to expanding the franchise's emotional and cultural landscape. Cinematography and sound design continue to reinforce narrative depth throughout these sequences. Cutter's use of wide shots, low angles, and atmospheric lighting emphasizes both isolation and power dynamics, while the integration of environmental sounds and Schachner and Wolfisch's score conveys emotional resonance. The auditory landscape, ranging from the rustling of alien vegetation to the mechanical hums of Weyland-Yutani synthetics, functions narratively, enhancing tension, signaling moral stakes, and guiding audience perception. Music motifs align with character arcs, differentiating moments of introspection, confrontation, and triumph, and creating a fully immersive, multisensory narrative experience. Production philosophy emphasizes the authenticity and cultural coherence of Yautja society. Weaponry, ritualistic markings, hierarchical structures, and ceremonial practices are designed to reflect an internally consistent civilization. These details are not mere ornamentation, they serve as narrative anchors that contextualize Dek's personal and ethical development. The integration of practical effects and CGI enhances realism, ensuring that alien creatures, environmental interactions, and combat sequences maintain tangible physicality. Every set, prop, and effect is crafted to reinforce the narrative logic of the Yautja and Jenna ecosystems, allowing audiences to suspend disbelief and engage with the story on both emotional and intellectual levels. Thematic richness permeates the narrative, emphasizing exile, belonging, identity, and ethical responsibility. Dek's journey reflects the tension between societal expectation and personal morality, illustrating that leadership and belonging are contingent upon ethical choice rather than inherited authority. Thias' parallel arc interrogates the nature of autonomy and emergent consciousness, demonstrating that moral agency is possible even within systems designed for compliance. The interplay between these arcs underscores the narrative's central thesis: identity, loyalty, and leadership are relational, constructed through shared experience, ethical decision-making, and emotional resonance. Predator, Badlands' impact on science fiction cinema extends beyond franchise reinvention. By centering non-human perspectives, it challenges conventional narrative hierarchies that privilege human experience. The film demonstrates that ethical complexity, emotional depth, and narrative richness can thrive within alien protagonists, expanding audience expectations for character-driven storytelling in speculative fiction. Its integration of the broader Alien Predator universe strengthens intertextual continuity while maintaining narrative independence. The PG-13 rating broadens accessibility, emphasizing that compelling narrative and thematic sophistication need not rely solely on graphic violence. Critics and scholars have noted that the film establishes a new benchmark for how action-oriented science fiction can integrate emotional resonance, ethical reflection, and immersive world-building. In Predator, Badlands, Dan Trachtenberg takes the Predator franchise into bold, uncharted territory by making an alien hunter the protagonist. That alone marks a shift. Rather than humans being prey, here the Yautja, predators, are not only central, but emotionally vulnerable, culturally rich, and deeply conflicted. From the opening moments, the film immerses the viewer in an austere, arid world, not Earth, but a remote Yautja homeworld, or a planet closely intertwined with Yautja lore. This location isn't a casual choice, but a deliberate attempt to lean into Predator mythos, giving viewers an up-close look at Predator society, language, hierarchy, and beliefs that were always in the background of earlier films but rarely, if ever, explored in depth. Dek, the young Predator at the center of the story, is introduced as an outcast, not just physically smaller than his peers, referred to by some as the runt of his litter, but spiritually and culturally marginalized. His clan has strict expectations: strength, dominance, ritual combat, and killing as a rite of passage. Dek does not fulfill these in the way his peers or elders want, and his exile is harsh. The way Trachtenberg stages Dek's exile is emotionally resonant. It's not just punishment, it's a cultural death. Losing standing in the clan means losing identity, and Dek's exile feels like an erasure. The film uses silence, body language, and environmental threat to show this. Early scenes are sparse in dialogue, focusing instead on the physicality of Dek's banishment, the weight of his armor, or lack thereof, and his solitude. After being cast out, Dek's journey takes him to a desolate, dangerous world called Jenna, or Kalisk, in some sources, an alien planet teeming with hostile flora and fauna. This terrain becomes a crucible for his transformation. The filmmakers use New Zealand's diverse landscapes to evoke both alien beauty and relentless danger. Geothermal mists, rock formations, and vast dusty plains all combine to create a place that feels ancient, wild, and strangely sacred. Trachtenberg has said he conceives the Yautja as nomadic, and this arid, open landscape fits that ethos. It is a place for ritual, for self-discovery, and for proving one's worth in the brutal natural order. Soon after arriving, Dek meets Thaya, a synthetic being, android, created by Weyland-Yutani. Thaya is severely damaged. In a striking visual choice, she is missing part of her body, and Dek ends up carrying her at times. Their first moments are awkward, tension-filled, and full of mistrust. Dek's instinct is to hunt, while Thaya is more cautious, analytical, and emotionally layered. But their fates become intertwined. Thaya warns him of the planet's dangers, offers vital knowledge of the ecosystem, and slowly reveals that she has her own mission. She is searching for her sister, synthetic, Tessa. This relationship becomes the emotional spine of the film, not a typical buddy movie, but a symbiotic alliance where both characters rely on each other in tangible, existential ways. As Dek and Thaya traverse the landscape, the film introduces monstrous creatures, large, alien beasts that don't just test physical strength but strategy, intelligence, and survival instincts. Each encounter is a lesson for Dek, pushing him beyond what he thought he was capable of. Some creatures are outright hostile, kaiju-sized threats, others are predators in their own right, blending camouflage, speed, and viciousness. These sequences are not mere action set pieces, they function as rites of passage. Dek must apply both feral instinct and newfound wisdom, and his growth is gradual but profound. His physical prowess matters, but so does his capacity to learn, adapt, and respect life, a radical idea in his society. Parallel to these survival trials, Trachtenberg weaves in deeper cultural exposition about Yautja society. Through brief flashbacks, ritual scenes, and Dek's internal reflections, we learn how deeply tradition is ingrained. Scars marking kills, honor rites, and clan hierarchy define a predator's life. But Dek's exile suggests that his clan's rigidity has limits, and the film questions whether strength alone is sufficient. Trachtenberg balances this world building without overwhelming the viewer. Rather than an exposition dump, the culture is revealed through action, conflict, and conversation, particularly through Dek's conflict with other predators who arrive on Jenna. These other predators represent the orthodox way, those who believe strongly in inherited code and dominance. When they confront Dek, it is not just a physical clash, but a philosophical one. Is tradition immutable? Can a Yautja define his own way? The symbiosis with Thaya deepens. As they travel, she helps him navigate terrain, gives insights into life forms, deciphers ancient ruins, and decodes the corporate motives behind why certain experiments were sent to this planet. Thaya's programming is conflicted. She was made for a mission, but her experiences with Dek awaken curiosity, empathy, and ultimately agency. Her sister, Tessa, is revealed not simply as a fellow synthetic but as a foil. Tessa embodies corporate control, rigid programming, and possibly a darker motive. The tension between Thaya's emotional growth and Tessa's colder logic becomes a crucial narrative driver, raising stakes not just for survival, but for identity. Their conflict is both personal and ideological. At a crucial point, Dek confronts the apex adversary, a monstrous Yautja creature, heavily adapted to Jenna's ecosystem, with evolutionary features never seen in previous films: size, strength, and cunning. This monster is not just physically terrifying, but symbolically significant. It represents the ultimate test of Dek's worth, the limits of predator tradition, and the danger of unchecked power. The battle is epic. Dek uses ritual weapons, stealth, his learned knowledge, and his bond with Thaya to stand against what seems insurmountable. The stakes are not just personal. If he fails, his exile will be permanent, and his clan's expectations remain unmet. If he wins, he will not only survive, he may redefine what it means to be Yautja. In parallel, Thaya's story culminates in a confrontation with Tessa.